March 26, 1967. Dear Robert, why, my friend, did Papa go out alone and hungry? Did Francis and Mama ever talk to you of his condition when they returned from Illinois last year? Was it ever put to him that he could stay with you people and eat when you ate and fast when you fasted? I wonder. When poverty comes in at the door, love flies out of the window. Can you see the division among us and its effect? This is our greatest obstacle. I sometimes wonder how this will turn out. Before we can ever effectively face down the foe, we must have had long since learned to share, trust, communicate, and live harmoniously with each other. Our new state governor has decreed that the daily food allowance for each convict be cut exactly in half. We get almost no grade 1 protein now. Stuff like eggs, meat, and milk products is seldom seen now, so my experiments in self-discipline are now paying off. Everyone else is hungry now, while I feel nothing. And this is just the beginning. The reactionary repressive forces presently at work will bring things to such a crisis soon that Baldwin's warning of the fire next time must soon be borne out with its sinister accomplishments. Take care of yourself, Pop. Comfort Mom as well as you can and tell her I'm alright, healthy, happy, content. Of course, this is a lie, but she likes to be lied to. George. March 27th, 1967. Dear Mom, please don't take what I expressed in my last letter too seriously. I was feeling extremely bad. Try to relax. The mental depression you are presently gripped by comes from a very common cause, particularly among us blacks here in the U.S. As a defense, we look at life through our rose-colored glasses, rationalizing and pretending that things are not so bad after all. But then, day after day, tragedy after tragedy strikes and confuses us, and our pretense fails to aid or dispel the nagging feeling that we cannot have security in an insecure society, especially when one belongs to an insecure caste within this larger society. I believe sincerely that you will be a very unhappy and perplexed woman for as long as you try to pretend that you have anything in common with this culture, or better, that this culture has anything in common with you. And as long as you pretend that there is no difference between men, and as long as you try to be more English than the English, while the English ignore your attempts and use your humility to their advantage. I suggest no action, no physical action that is, for I know you have never been a woman of action, but I do suggest that you purge your mind little by little of some of your Western notions. Direct your nervous animosity at the right people in their system, and stop. For your own sake, please stop blaming yourself. If you were, right now, walking toward your kitchen with the whole family's life savings in your hand, let's say, and I sneaked up behind you and pulled the rug from under you, and you fell and broke your arm, leg, nose, and the money flew into the burning fireplace, would you get up blaming me for pulling the rug? Or will you just lay there and blame yourself and pretend that you didn't really fall? Or that the whole thing made no difference anyway? The analogy is perfect. Do you know who I blame for what has happened to me the last 25 years and before to my ancestors? I will be narrow-minded indeed if I blamed any of you, my folks. I don't blame you for not teaching me how to get what I wanted without getting put in jail, nor do I blame myself. I was born knowing nothing and am a product of my total surroundings. I blame the capitalistic dog, the imperialistic, cave-dwelling brute that kidnapped us, pulled the rug from under us, made us a caste within his society with no vertical economic mobility. As soon as all this became clear to me and I developed the nerve to admit it to myself, that we were defeated in war and now captives, slaves, or actually that we inherited a neo-slave existence, I immediately became relaxed, always expecting the worst, and started working on the remedy. Can you play chess? It relaxes, builds foresight, alertness, concentration, and judgment. Learn so we can play next year. George. May 9th, 1967. Dear Robert, that's great about the classes. You passed the exams pretty easy, didn't you? It's wonderful to have a pop with brains. I was approved for a transfer, but it is not official yet. When it is, I'll inform you of details. I'll be getting a lot of work done lately. My mind is fast becoming clear, and I am slowly harnessing my emotions. I can go days without speaking a word. With the pursuit of food and shelter relegated to the state, I have been able to channel all my thoughts to important things, significant things. So I attempt to bend this experience to our benefit rather than let them weaken and destroy me as they would like. You are aware that these places, this one in particular, will either bring out the best in an individual or ruin him entirely. Wherever they send me, Robert, I will try as hard as my character will allow to avoid all involvement in these situations that lead to trouble. But I can promise nothing. The future holds no surprises for me. I expect anything, including trouble, especially trouble, considering the times. I have adopted these last several months a new attitude. However, that will limit the scope of my troubles. Take care of yourself. George. May 16th, 1967. Dear Robert, that is good reasoning concerning the school issue. It was a wise decision in every way you look at it. The other way, Catholic school, you pay more for less education. Plus, they make emotional pansies of the boys with that sanctimonious dogma. Dear Pop, I'm not just talking for the sake of talking. I am deeply concerned for John and you all. Much thought goes into all I attempt to convey. Whenever a man builds an image of himself and of his surroundings that he cannot live up to and that does not conform to the de facto situation, the end result must be confusion and emotional breakdown. If my instructor tells me that the world and its affairs are run as well as they possibly can be, that I am governed by wise and judicious men, that I am free and should be happy, and if when I leave the instructor's presence and encounter the exact opposite, if I actually sense or see confusion, war, inflation, recession, depression, death, and decay, is it not reasonable that I should become perplexed? If my instructor tells me that sex is evil, bad, base, and I happen to like sex, is it not reasonable to assume that I will develop mixed emotions concerning sex? If this instructor relates to me that sex is bad, thinking of it is lustful, and lust is a sign of my moral decay, what opinion will I have of myself? This is what they will do to John at that Catholic school. But that is just part of it. He will also learn that J.C. was white, which is a lie. That the Egyptians were white, which is a lie. That the people of India are white under their black skin. That Chinese are yellow when they range from brown to the blackest black. He will get a lot of this misinformation in public school too, but not nearly as much. With a little effort after school from you, this can be corrected. Tell him that these men don't always tell the truth. Make him read histories by Ronald Segal, Dubois, etc. Make him read the pro-Eastern writers so that he will have a good cross-section of all there is to be heard. Show him how to masturbate and explain to him that making love with a woman is the most natural thing on earth. Explain how he can do so without getting the girl pregnant. Tell him that there is no hell, no heaven, and no immortality, and that all things are permissible, as long as the next man's feelings are considered. None of those at home who contest you in your judgment know nearly as much about life as you, so you must be firm and decisive. None of the Western European cultures know anything about philosophy, love of knowledge. They know nothing of the proper way that men should carry on their relations with other men. Proof of this: who originated the passport laws, tariff laws, atom bomb, competitive enterprise, etc., etc. They only excel in one area: technology. So let John learn chemistry at school. You give him his economics, history, and philosophy at home. George. May 21st, 1967. Dear Robert, Penny was here again last week. She has taught the little guy how to say Uncle George. So, Uncle George was ringing the length of the visiting hall for a couple of hours. However, I was less than pleased. I tried to get him to change it to Comrade George, but he didn't seem to understand. Uncle George is too much like Uncle Tom and Uncle Ben of Ricebox fame for comfort. I trust you are well. I am holding off the ill effects of the concentration camp as best I can. It seems a losing battle, however. I've had to take to wearing glasses of considerable strength due to failure of my eyesight. Living in this constant half-light, I guess. When you told me a while back of Francis's serious eye problem, I resolved upon my release to have one of mine transplanted into her head. But this will no longer be any bargain for her. I have been having trouble with my eyes for a year. When I finally was able to maneuver an eye test, I was surprised at the amount of money they took from my accounts. Money that you have sent me that I have not used yet. I was even more surprised when I finally got the glasses 2 months later with their strength and how much they improved my vision. Speaking of money and accounts, Pop, I'm flush for now. By flush, I mean I have stocked up on envelopes and toothpaste. I've come to realize that I don't need much to eat to stay alive, and I don't smoke. I can get fat on what the average man may starve on. So the money you have been sending me can be put to use at home there. Your books, or perhaps something for John. He also needs supplementary reading material. I am sorry that you and Mama don't make each other happy. European Anglo-American brainwashing is at the bottom of it. Those empty pseudo-middle-class ideas that we have adopted from the opposition make us unhappy in the same way the middle class itself is unhappy. Then too, when poverty comes in at the door, love leaves by the window. We all know who has caused our poverty. I have experienced the same thing with women and men. All the women I've had tried to use me, tried to secure through me a soft spot in this cutthroat system for themselves. All they ever wanted was clothes and money and to be taken out to flash these things. I no longer have time for such small ideas or small people. Blacks that I have met here who exhibit such characteristics I disdain and ignore. The same with any woman I may have when I get out. She must let me retrain her mind or no deal. George. May 28th, 1967. Dear Robert, I've been a good boy lately. Kind, polite, forgiving. Don't know if it will do any good though, since people invariably mistake kindness for weakness. I really cannot imagine how anyone can stay detached and complacent for any period of time and still maintain social contacts on any level. It no longer surprises me, but I still find the general acceptance and widespread practice of the more deranged products of Western culture disturbing. Prying, nosy, schizophrenic, domineering, psychoneurotic people press you from all sides. They remain in a continual state of agitation, always on the brink of doing something maniacal. Capitalism, I believe, the capitalizing on the next man's labor, on the next man's weakness, has contributed greatly to the development of the anomalous Western man. Capitalism, competitive enterprise, man competing against man for the necessary things, for status symbols, for power to repress his competitors and secure his personal well-being, to exercise his ego, his fancy. I just cannot get used to the idea of some petty, stereotyped, bureaucratic official, patently suffering from some mental disorder, asking me questions, calling on me to explain myself. It is odd and ironical, the trickery and turnabout that has gone down these last few generations. Chew on this a few moments. A colonizer, a usurer, the original thief, a murderer for personal gain, a kidnapper, slaver, a maker of cannon, bombs, and poison gas, an egocentric parasite, the original forked tongue. The odd man is trying to convey to us that we must adjust ourselves to his warp, that we must learn to be more like him, that because we're not, we're backward, underdeveloped, unsophisticated. This is strange and contradictory. I am deeply sorry that I ever told a lie, stole anything, robbed, and cheated at anything, mainly because it is so much like conforming to Western ways. To all appearances, they are upset with me for doing these things. That privilege is supposed to be reserved for them, I guess. So what do they mean by saying that we must get in with them, be like them, adopt capitalism, clothe ourselves in Western ways? This is a strange and contradictory thing. If we, the colored and black of the world, adopt capitalism, where would we have to seek our colonies? Europe? The U.S.? Who would we capitalize on if we used their history as a pattern? Them, I should say. Who would we kidnap, murder, lynch, enslave, and then neglect? So what do they mean by saying, do as I do? I don't think, well, I know that they are not serious, not sincere. I think they are employing another trick, a ploy to further confuse us and use us. I think what they mean is not do as I do, but do as I say. In the 1770s, the Europeans over here wanted to pull away from the Europeans of England. They called it a freedom fight. Now we men of color here in the U.S. want to pull away from these Europeans, and they call it subversion, irresponsibility, etc. I don't even speak to them anymore. I go my way and hope to be left alone. George. July 13th, 1967. Dear Robert, I'm in regular adjustment center. Segregation again. They have let me have my personal property, books, toilet articles, envelopes. That is minus 90% of it. It happens every time I transfer from one part of the prison to another or go to isolation. My stuff gets ripped off. I got robbed. I'm sure it wasn't the officials. They are such nice, efficient people, so I won't complain here with my pencil. I'll need a few dollars to replace the necessary things, envelopes, dictionary, etc., when you can afford it. Your physical appearance hasn't changed at all over the years, Pop. Clean living has preserved you marvelously. Do you ever drink any alcoholic beverages? I have never known you to, but that doesn't mean that you don't. How much sleep do you average a day? Perhaps I won't live to be as old as you are, but if I do, I won't look as good. The loose skin on my face is already starting to wrinkle, and strange as it seems, I tend toward obesity if I eat certain foods. I must have picked that up from Mama. How is she? Tell her I'm going to be a good boy from now until I can get out of here. I worry about Penny. Does she know that she can come home if the circumstances make it necessary? She respects you for what you have done for us and accepts you as you are. So do I, Pop. I recall that you never had more than one suit or two pairs of shoes all throughout the early years. I never remember you having a moment's personal gratification during those years. No one believes me when I tell them you never went to a nightclub or finger poppers party during the 20 years that I remember. I don't think any other man in the U.S. would have reacted as you did concerning that incident with the Hudson car, fixing it with your hands and driving it for 5 years in that condition. False pride would have forced anyone else into radical and uneconomic acts. I felt real bad about that, but I didn't understand life then as I do now. I'm deeply sorry for the weak, silly transgressions of my past, and I'm sorry that I won't be able to conduct my relations with the world as you would have me conduct them. I see the big picture where you may never have. I think I see the larger historical concept in its full detail. The obligation you felt toward us, I feel toward history. I must follow my call. It is of great importance to me that you understand this and give me your blessings. I don't care about anyone else. I don't feel I must explain myself or be understood by anyone else on earth. George. July 15th, 1967. My friend, I got your letter of June 5th. I have it here before me. I told Les to cooperate with your efforts for me. I sure do need some of the benefits of togetherness now. As I explained, I am in adjustment center here for an undefined amount of time. Les speaks of me coming home with optimism, but I would benefit largely from a transfer. No one among the officials, that is, ever calls me out of my cell anymore to speak with me or my progress or my future. I'm just locked down and forgotten. Can a lawyer do anything about getting me a transfer? He would have to go through Sacramento. The justification for such action is obvious. I cannot adjust here. The officials have preconceived notions about my behavioral patterns and consequently look for the worst in me. The atmosphere here is aggressive, and I'm too far away from home. I cannot get regular visits and thus miss the beneficial influence of you and my parents. My friend, my thinking was changed somewhat since I saw you last. That fellow who sent pictures of his Cadillac auto up here can explain some of the workings and progress of my thoughts. I hope he doesn't betray himself with that fast living I hear he is doing. Seems he has learned nothing from bitter experience. I have trained away, pressed out forever, the last of my Western habits. You remember I never got intoxicated or spent any money or time on trifles, but in the passing of these last couple of years, I have completely retrained myself and my thinking to the point now that I think and dream of one thing only, 24 hours of each day. I have no habits, no ego, no name, no face. I feel no love, no tenderness for anyone who does not think as I do. There can be no ties of blood or kinship strong enough to move me from my course. I'll never trade my self-determination for a car, cheap mass-produced clothes, clapboard house, or a couple of nights a week at the go-go. Control over the circumstances that surround my existence is of the first importance to me. Without this control, or with control in someone else's hands, I am forever insecure, subject at all times to the whim and caprice of the man in control. And you and I know how whimsical some men can be. Well, Pop, I'll be going outside to court the 7th of August to testify for a friend. I'll get a glimpse of the world at large, if you can call San Rafael the world at large. I hope you are doing well. I would have written before now, but I was in isolation up until the 11th of this month, as you know. Do you have time to read? I'll suggest some books, if so. Next letter. Take care. George. July 19th, 1967. Dear Robert, I wrote you a letter about 2 weeks ago. It was returned to me today. It never got out of the institution. Received your letter of the 15th today. No change here. Tell A.A. to get busy and make my woman start writing. A visit every now and then would be nice also. Tell him to send me her new address that I may send her a correspondence form. You don't know her, but he will. Penny has not been up to see me since you came. No letter either. Hope she is all right. Locked up 24 hours a day now. It's all right though. Gives me plenty of time at my work. My cell faces north, and there is a window in front of it. Plenty of fresh air comes into my cell. George. July 23rd, 1967. Dear Robert, I feel relieved to know that you are taking John out of Catholic school. Man, falling under the conservative influence of those admin and fakes was the worst thing that ever happened to me. How could you ever allow it? It was Mama's idea, but you should never have let her sell it to you. I remember Chicago all right. In fact, I remember too much. I was very much confused and dissatisfied during those years. They had much to do with the development of my character. I've had to unlearn and re-examine all that I experienced in those years. But what you were really referring to was how it stayed hot all night, with people sleeping on the beaches and such. I remember the garage roof where I was virtually held prisoner sometimes, there at North Racine Street. It is criminal to do that to a child, and no parks near enough to go to, no yard, front or back to play with the neighbors' kids, no neighbors really except the ones on Lake Street. I remember glimpses of our place over there on Lake also. This is a dog's life, Pops. You had nothing then. You have worked hard, and obeyed the laws of our masters, but you still have nothing. Is it idle dreaming for me to want an end to something like this? I wrote Mama 3 letters 3 months ago. She didn't answer or acknowledge any. I owe her loyalty just for being my mother. But she is adult, and I never baby adults. She resents me because I won't accept her views on method and means of getting by in this rat race. She once told me that I had a complex that made me view the world as I do. In so many words, she was telling me that I shouldn't be complexed about being of the lowest social class, or in our case, caste. She was saying that I should be indifferent about being used and abused like a goat or milk cow or something. I understand her and all black women over here. Women like to be dominated, love being strong-armed, need an overseer to supplant their weakness. So how could she really understand my feelings on self-determination? For this reason, we should never allow women to express any opinions on the subject, but just to sit, listen to us, and attempt to understand. It is for them to obey and aid us, not to attempt to think. George, July 28th, 1967. Dear Georgia, for me, the word soul has yet to be properly defined. I have seen or felt no evidence of its existence. I have heard the word and listened to the theory connected with it, but it is abstract and academic at best. The theory of an existing and benevolent God simply doesn't make sense to anyone who is rational. A benevolent and omnipotent God would never allow such imbalances as I see to exist for 1 second. If by chance I am wrong, however, I must then assume that being born black called for some automatic punishment for sins I know nothing about, and being innocent, it behooves me to defy God. I seriously fail to understand when someone speaks of my soul, but I do know what my body needs. I know what my mind incessantly craves. Gratification of these is what I must pursue. As a woman, I can understand your being naturally disposed to servitude. I can understand your feelings, but what I can't understand is why you would have me feel the same, considering that I am a man. Why have you always attempted to implant womanly ideas into my character? Of course, it is your opinion to do as you please, but please don't feel that I love you less simply because I failed to respond, or feel that I love you any less because I do not have time to explain myself. Love has never turned aside the boot, blade, or bullet. Neither has it ever satisfied my hunger of body or mind. The author of my hunger, the architect of the circumstantial pressures which are the sole cause of my ills, will find no peace in this existence or the next, or the one following that. Never, never. I'll dog his trail to infinity. I hope I never will feel love for the thing that causes insufferable pain. What I do feel is the urge to resist and never stop resisting, or even think of stopping my resistance until victory falls to me. Extreme perhaps, but involved is my self-determination and control of the environment upon which my existence depends, and the existence of my father, mother, Dolores, and Penny sons, and all that I feel tied to. We are in an extreme situation. I didn't create this impasse. I had nothing to do with the arrival of matters at this destructive end, as you infer. Did I colonize, kidnap, make war on myself, destroy my own institutions, enslave myself, use myself, and neglect myself, steal my identity, and then, being reduced to nothing, invent a competitive economy, knowing that I cannot compete? Sounds very foolish, but this is what you propose when you place the blame on me or on us. I was a fool who created this monster, one unaccustomed to power and its use, a foolish man grown heady with power and made drunk, dizzy drunk from the hot air that inflates his ego. I am his victim, born innocent, a total product of my surroundings. Everything that I am, I developed into because of circumstantial and situational pressures. I was born knowing nothing. Necessity and environment formed me. and everyone like me. Please accord me at least the social morality that springs from its contorted brain center. I'm through with weakness and cowardice. I've trained it out. Let come what comes. I can never delude myself into thinking that I love my enemies. I can hardly do any worse than I am doing now. If worst comes to worst, that's all right. I'll just continue the fight in hell. George. August 10th, 1967. Dear Robert, things are looking up. I have a promise on my injured leg. Should be singing about it any time now. I'm in pretty good shape and it won't kill me. Good move you made on your way out. I could never say anything like that for myself. No one will believe me. Doing good, minding my business. Won't let you down. Dolores quite handsome. You know that was the first time I'd seen her in 7 years. There are 3 ways to enforce and build discipline in a child. Through terror, through guilt, and through shame. The first principle is the worst and involves keeping the child in constant fear of beating or harsh reprimand. This is not conducive to all-around adjustment. Either the child becomes a confirmed coward or at best unstable and erratic. A child with feelings or insecurity, lack of confidence, may later on try to prove himself by deliberately doing things against what he has been taught is right. Think on that a moment. Then the guilt concept. It finds expression in convincing the child that he will suffer God's wrath, religion, or be looked upon as a fool, knucklehead, buffoon, or evil and malign person by the rest of mankind. This is not good in that it causes the child to be too dependent. He cannot develop or become creative for fear of disapproval from on high. Then, what man can live up to the expectations of God? Then there are those among us who cannot live up to the expectations of other men, society. What happens to the child who cannot live up to God's or man's expectations? The child trained or disciplined through guilt feelings. His confidence is forever destroyed, and he becomes the ubiquitous temporizer, the listless apathetic. The last principle is the only one worthy of intelligent parents. Shame. If a child does not react in the proper way and carry out his duties toward parents and peers, he should be taught to feel shame or lose face, as the Eastern people call it. The child feels that he has let himself down when he fails to do the proper thing. Only constant and calm, rational reproof can cause this feeling in a kid. In other words, it takes brains and persistence on the part of the parent to shape the child's thinking. It should be clear that becoming frantic and beside oneself, beating and cussing is going to give the child a new experience and leave an impression that may not be wholesome. Felix Green wrote that in all the time he spent in a certain country in the East, he never saw a child throw a tantrum. He asked one of the social workers there about it, describing the features of a childish tantrum. The Eastern social worker's shocked expression and complete ignorance of any such things happening to the children caused Green to investigate further and denounce that they don't go through emotional breakdowns because they have no precedence from their parents. Take care, George. August 26, 1967. Dear Robert, the paper started 1 week ago, Saturday. Everything is all right. I ought to do as you say about the patients. Perhaps I expect too much from people. Hospital and x-rays any day now. I expect help from certain people only, but I'll take your advice and look no more. Of course, this doesn't mean that I am going to stop helping others as much as I can. I'll continue to give as good an example of how we should treat each other as I can. But as you indicate, I shouldn't expect this to influence anyone else to treat me similarly. Take care of yourself, George. September 1, 1967. Dear Robert, John is about the same age as I was when we first moved out here. I remember well my attitudes and confusion at the time. He can't be too much different since our development was forced along similar lines. Of course, he has had a slightly better chance or atmosphere to build the things necessary for the changeover from man-child to man. That school mama was sending him to did him great harm, but not irreparable harm, since in his case you were on the job after school showing pride and knowledge of self and kind, and explaining the promise and problems in acquiring self-determination and control over all the circumstances surrounding our existence. Of course, you have been explaining that this control must never be allowed to remain in the hands of strangers or incompetents, etc. So I hope he is not as awed and confused as I was then. Give him my regards. Tell him I said he is charged to take good care of his mother and sisters, that since he has grown so big and strong so soon, he should brace himself to his duties early. Tell him that I said that life is serious and we must be careful. One misstep can cause us years of regret and grief and sorrow without relief. Take care of yourself, George. September 12th, 1967. Dear Robert, I am doing well. No new problems. Please say nothing else about the leg to anyone. You could cause me trouble. I'll live. I'll stay in reasonably good condition just for occasions like this. I can see about it if I get out next year. You should know about protesting with the mouth. It never avails us anything but grief. I no longer do so in any form, for it indicates naivete. It means that subconsciously one may still be looking for justice or humanity from places that we have ample proof of it not existing. I worry about Penny, and I would like to see her there with you. I have not seen or heard from her since you were here last. Perhaps she feels she doesn't need or want any of us. Have you heard from her? Perhaps it's my fault. I push people away by expecting too much of them. I probably used the wrong presentation with her and frightened her. Or she may not care to hear about clean living and high ideals. People tend to run like hell at the mention of sacrifice and responsibility. Give everyone my regards and take care of yourself. George. September 14th, 1967. Dear Mama, I hope this year's birthday finds you well. I would like to be able to give you things and take you places, but I've been unfortunate and slow learning. But I have learned well. Perhaps next year I'll be able to give you a villa in Tanzania. I'm fine. My work progresses well. Seems that all I've predicted is now coming true, though much sooner than I thought, I must admit. Take care of yourself, George. September 24th, 1967. Dear Robert, received your letter. All is well here. You have everyone back there with you except Delora now. That is good in a way. You have another chance to teach them how to live. Arrange their values and attitudes so that they correspond with our situation, our aspirations, our newly reestablished identity. Penny expressed the thought to me that since you do not have much to say around there, you don't care about them and their little problems. She expressed the feelings of all those there who do not understand you in saying this. Women and children enjoy and need a strong hand poised above them. They need direction and someone to show concern for them, and you may have to make your presence felt there, a little anyway. Of course, I'm not talking about being a tyrant, but just some rational, moderate, but persistent pressure to the left. I imagine I'll really be able to get down to fighting weight now. I told you what happened to the noon meal. I really don't miss it though. Take care of yourself. George. September 30th, 1967. Dear Robert, getting plenty of work done. How's your scholastic project going? Are you still attending the night classes? I thought that was a wonderful idea. Speed reading and vocabulary power are foremost in elevating the mind. They can be worked on in spare time, 10 or 20 minutes a day. I consistently work on both, especially vocabulary, out of small paperback pocketbooks sold in the canteen and in the prison bookstore. But since I have much more study time than you, I go 1 hour or so on each daily. There are dozens of these little books published today. Every time I see a different one, I try to make it part of my collection. Are you well, my friend? I'm getting thin as a rail. Feel all right, however. Give my regards to John and Penny. Take care of yourself, George. October 3rd, 1967. Dear Georgia, a thank you note for money and letter. I can always use money, but discharge your obligations at home first. I can do without. If I were you, I would treat Pop a little better. He has been pretty good to us all when one considers the shocks and strains he has had to live with. As a woman, you just do not, and I guess never will, understand what it means to be a man in this particular situation here in the U.S. Women just don't suffer the mental mortification of defeat and emasculation that we men do. Robert has lived with it for many years, trying to rationalize it, justify it, pretend that it does not affect him. But it has affected him very deeply. Imagine how he must feel when his woman won't even let him run the house. For you to just outright countermand his wishes on a matter concerning the education of his son must be a bitter dose for him to swallow indeed. After what he must accept from the outside world every day of his life, to come to his home and also be made to carry water and cut wood and take orders is adding insult to injury. Though you may not see much evidence of it, Robert still harbors the desire to be a man and assert himself. He is not completely dead inside. The years and years of regret and grief, discomfort and defeat he has endured since the depression years of his childhood, all the forgetting and pretending and cheek-turning he has had to do cannot be denied. It lives with him, still jammed back in the dark corners of his mind. I've seen it, Georgia, believe me. I've seen it in him and in many others of his generation. One day in the near future, these feelings of mass discontent must break their bounds. It's just as natural and predictable as the sunrise. I am ready now. When they are ready, nothing will be able to countervail our march toward victory. In John's case, it is simply a matter of what we need most, and how can he be best equipped to survive the crisis that now grips us. I think we need tough, well-informed, and loyal additions to the tribe. Can he develop these characteristics at this terrible place you advocate? You have been living in the big city now for 25 years. It is almost unbelievable that you have not discovered that the guys who will be training him there are 90% sex deviants, homosexuals, etc., and 10% freeloading incompetents who couldn't get food and shelter any other way. I would never make a charge like this unless I had first-hand evidence. I hope that you were merely ignorant of these things. I hope that you have not intentionally sold out John's bosom interests. Robert has sheltered you from the world to some extent. You have not come in contact with things he sees daily, so let him have some say. George. October 11th, 1967. Dear Robert, I received the letter with the money in it all right. Thank you. I'm going pretty good here, no problems, no new ones anyway. I went before a formal two-man review committee here recently. They gave me at least 4 more months to do here in the adjustment center. I guess we can call this improvement of a sort since I'm usually told nothing. You say John is having trouble with math, and that you feel it's just a matter of his settling down to his work. I wondered when you mentioned this just what it was that is keeping him from his studies. How does he spend his time? Is there anyone there to help him with his studies? Of course, you are right that all he has to do is apply himself to his work. At this stage of the schooling structure, nothing is really difficult. Math is never difficult, since its laws are positive. All that needs to be done is to take the necessary time and learn the formulas and principles. Of course, if too much time is spent in class on religious matters, the teacher is at fault, not the student. In fact, if any time is spent on religious matters during the school hours, the student is being cheated. Take care of yourself. George. October 17th, 1967. Dear Robert, the time slips away from me. I'm surrounded here by fools, degenerates, and phonies. I suffer a constant bombardment of nonsense from all sides. There is no rest from it, even at night. 24 hours a day, all my senses must endure the shock of this attack from the lunatic fringe. So I insert my earplugs and bury myself in my thoughts and my work. The days, even the weeks, lapse one into the other, endlessly into one another. Each day that comes and goes is exactly like the one that went before. If I am lax in my duties toward you, forgive me. I am living under strain. I am sorry to hear about your friend. The same has happened to some of mine here. I think I know how you feel. However, I try to think of those things as releases. How was my letter to John received? Mama may have torn it up. If John wants to go to the trouble of framing those parts that trouble him into a letter, I have a fair understanding of math. No new problems here, just waiting it out. Time is on my side. I'm 26 now, and I'll be 26 when I leave here. Be it 40 years from today. Take care, George. October 18th, 1967. Dear Robert, how is Penny and the little guy? I guess I missed them quite a bit. What a difference their presence makes here. My language studies are coming along well. I guess if I don't get out before January, and it's not very likely that I will, I'll go into Arabic next. With 4 languages plus English, I'll be able to communicate with 3/4 of the people on earth. I am presently working on Spanish and Swahili. Spanish is spoken by most peoples from Mexico to Chile in what is the fastest growing population area in the world. Swahili is spoken by all of Eastern Africa. I may find communication with these peoples important in my work. All that remains is for me to learn Arabic and Chinese. Perhaps I'll start on these two next year. I've done well with Spanish. I trust you are well. Don't work yourself too hard. You cannot get rich on wages. I have had no response from John to my last two letters. What's happening? Has he forgotten his brother? It has been a long time. He was just a baby when I first came here to the concentration camp. It's been 7 years, 1 month now. Take care of yourself. George. October 24th, 1967. Dear Robert, I'll be considered for transfer again this week. They'll probably approve Folsom for me this time. It is a maximum security prison like this, so there will be no change in my fortunes. One prison is like the other, except perhaps the minimum security places in the southern part of the state where they have a less aggressive atmosphere, where if one can get around the local constabulary, the chances for parole are greater. That is part of the reason that the guy who was arrested with me went home 4 years ago, and I am still here. Right before I was forced into that situation in Soledad and sent here, he was sent to Chino, but his folks had money to pass around. No new problems here, the same old things. I'm getting plenty of work done with my time. I am not trying to lose weight. I'm not eating as I should, but we discussed that before. You forget things too fast, but maybe that is good. I'm not sure. Perhaps, if I could forget, I could have some peace of mind, but I don't forget anything. Wounds scar my mind much worse than they scar my body. But I don't let such things as food, warmth, comfort, and lack of material things cause me any great distress. I'm doing as well as I can expect to, because I don't expect anything. Anything good, that is. Take care of yourself. George. October 26, 1967. Dear Robert, John tells me they have him studying Latin. I find this very depressing. No one has spoken Latin in 1,500 years. They are teaching the poor kid a dead language, wasting his precious time, his precious talent. A great blunder is again being made regarding your offspring, Robert. People only learn Latin these days so that they can read that thing they call the Bible in Latin and sound mysterious. It's a lot of European ritual, a lot of hocus pocus from the dark ages of Europe. The time he puts into that totally useless pursuit could be spent on math or science. Take care, George. November 2nd, 1967. Dear Robert, I received both your letters today, dated the 29th and 30th. True, I may forget myself sometimes, and I'll have to redouble my efforts to control this. I know it is wrong, and I know the proper method. It is the application of method that sometimes causes me trouble. But I'll redouble my effort to get over this. Emotion has much to do with it. All of my past life has been victimized by my emotions. I have struggled mightily with myself these last couple of years in an attempt to erase all emotion. The only method that can succeed is the clinical approach, the analytical technique of treating our problems. It is said, and with some justification, that the greatest battle is with oneself. So if I can gain a victory here, the real work shouldn't be too hard. On the subject of injury, there is the real and the imagined. You have made several references to the subject in the last month or two, and I have let them pass. By telling me that John has no chip on his shoulder, you attempted to make me feel alone and isolated in my attitudes. But you are wrong in trying to second guess me because I have no chip on my shoulder. I know the simplest way to handle an injury, whether real or fancied, is to forget it. I bear no one on earth any ill will. I have felt the sting of the knout, and I live in the shadow of the ovens. I am the object of the severest ridicule. Coon, monkey, shoe. A shoe is something to be walked on incidentally. Buck, savage, and child. But even in the face of all of this, I have not one chip on my shoulder. Aren't I a truly marvelous and forgiving person? Almost every day I have something to forgive and forget. Perhaps most of this is fanciful and illusionary, but every day I have the opportunity to practice this almost godlike facility I have built into myself. But then, to be honest with myself, it is not merely or solely due to strength of character that I am able to call up just a little more forgiveness. I also have this thing going with myself about not wanting to get killed. I don't know about that getting killed thing. Now, it would be a great loss to me, but I feel that I could forgive that too. Now I say this at the risk of seeming immodest, but to further illustrate my healthy outlook on the matter in question. Let me remind you that in spite of all, I am human, and I have myself done things that require forgiveness from others. I have transgressed against my fellows in moments of weakness and madness. It's hard, my friend. Because of my temperament, it's even harder. I hope I can make it. Take care of yourself. George. November 6th, 1967. Dear Robert, are you well? The changes are as slow as ever here. No new problems, however, except perhaps with my health. It may be failing. Headaches all the time and a skin condition that started some time back. Look at that picture I sent you of me taken upon my graduation. You may be able to see the discolored spots in my face. Well, the condition is growing worse. It is all over my face now. Huge discolored spots. I look like a leper. If you have a connection who is a dermatologist, perhaps you could pass me on some information on it. It is only on my face now, but it is progressive. It is spreading. I like to know what to do about it and what may be the cause. The cause, however, may be most important. I've been thinking that it is probably the food. Quality and quantity. My knee has gone down some and is not too sore anymore. I hope everything there is well. Give my special regards to Penny and John. Take care of yourself. George. November 1967. Dear Robert, this last word from you in John's presence convinces me that we can never reconcile our differences. I never realized that I was a source of embarrassment to you. I thought most blacks, especially those of our economic level, understood, vaguely at least, that these places were built with us in mind, just as were the project houses, unemployment offices, and Bible schools. Perhaps later, if we both live to see the outcome of all this, I will be able to explain myself better. But for now, you surely don't need me, and I have never needed anyone. Life has failed me. People I have had a right to expect something of in the past have failed me, and I fail myself almost every day. But I suffer no lasting effects from any of this because I derive my force and energy from no outside quarter. Your inability to understand and support me puts me at a loss, but I cannot allow this to influence my course. I must follow my mind. There is no turning back from awareness. If I were to alter my step now, I would always hate myself. I would grow old feeling that I had failed in the obligatory duty that is ours once we become aware. I would die as most of us blacks have died over the last few centuries without having lived. You have misjudged the depth of my feelings on these matters. They mean everything to me. If we could have found grounds for compatibility within the framework of my ideals, the purely mental aspect of my job could have been less difficult. I anticipated failure in this from the start. So I am not shocked or surprised now that the last has been said and we find ourselves poles apart. I'll be all right from here, Robert. I have the nervous equipment, and I'll spend my remaining time here checking my emotions and developing the clinical approach. You owe me nothing. Anything you may think you owe me, I absolve you of entirely. Because we look a lot alike, because the same blood flows in our veins, I thought we could perhaps pool our resources, plan great things, produce some remarkable changes and conclusions, and write a few pages of history. But I cannot see myself as well as other people see me, and perhaps you are justified in feeling ashamed of me. The most important abutment of our relation has disappeared. Perhaps it never existed. This is certainly my loss, but I cannot see any reason for us to communicate with each other again from this day until such time as I can demonstrate the usefulness of my ideals and methods. Please take care of yourself. Respectfully, George. December 1st, 1967. Dear Robert, I guess there is something to be said for a person who does as he is told, lives by the routine set up by his self-appointed bosses, etc. And of course, we must learn to fight our own battles. This way we can die alone, one at a time. This is a very old and proven idea. It has worked wonderfully up to now, and that is why 1967 finds us all so secure and well placed. My trouble is that I have expected too much of you. You are already doing your best, what you feel is right. How can I expect more? George. December 1967. Dear Robert, I'm all right, no change here. They gave me a little job in here where I am locked up, but took it back right away, I think to get a reaction. It has started to rain almost every day up here now, and it is rather cool. It is strange, but I think I prefer cool weather to warm. Have you ever heard anything from my friend? I don't trust many people very far, but I have very strong feelings that this guy will not abandon me or our ideas. Things must be very difficult for him, or he would have had a lawyer up here for me by now, or done something along that line. Of course, we never really get to know anyone to an absolute degree, but I saw this guy in many different situations, and he never showed the slightest weakness or reservation or self-interest. We need people like that. When we cannot even put confidence in them, we're through. Take care of yourself, George. December 13th, 1967. Dear Robert, hope you are well. I received your note and all is normal here. No new problems. I've got 6 months clean now, since June 8th. That is not much and surely not enough to satisfy my waters, but by June of next year, it will be 12 months clean. True. How is Penny doing on the job? Post office, isn't it? Tell her I miss her and the child. Is that guy she married honoring his financial commitment? And Francis, are you keeping up with the movements of the guy she tied up with? I'll be wanting to see him first thing upon my arrival there. It's cold up here this year, but since I don't go out directly in it too very often, it doesn't bother me much. Frances is supposed to be angry with me because I wouldn't let her get in any of her silly cliches last time you brought her up here. I didn't make things any better either when she wrote 2 months later decrying my supposed rudeness. When I explained to her that she was not supposed to hold any opinions other than those of her menfolk, she stopped writing. Tell her that I feel no ill will toward her, but when she hears us debating method and policy, she is supposed to be silent, listen, and try to learn something. Penny will sit and listen and try to understand. When she doesn't understand, she asks intelligent questions. I've bummed across this country 3 times, seen everything 8 times. Now what am I going to do with some advice from a 23-year-old girl who has been sheltered from the real world all her life? It is terrible that we have all been so divided. The social order is set up so as to encourage this. The powers that be don't want any loyal, loving groups forming up, so they discourage it in 1,000 subtle ways. And, as it is said, when poverty comes in the door, love leaves by the window. Too bad, I give up. Blood is not thicker than water. I was wrong ever to let my thoughts pass my lips. From now on, you people's reactionary ideas are your own. I never want to discuss anything serious with you again, and if you don't hear from me here too regularly, it is because I have nothing to say. Take care of yourself. George. December 19th, 1967. Dear Robert, I went to the board yesterday. They told me that if I kept this next year clean and clear of disciplinary infractions, I would have 18 months clean next time I saw them. Of course, I have not seen the official results yet. Maybe Friday I will. But it was pretty clear that I got another year to do. I'll write again when I get the final word. Penelope wrote me a letter last week stating that you and Mama sent a box of stuff up here to me after all, in spite of me asking you not to bother. I appreciate the sentiment, but you should not have done it. I probably will not be allowed to have it. You should know that I have to send a formal request from here, etc. They won't send it back either. They will keep it. Things will be much better between us when you start taking me seriously. Take care of yourself. You'll be able to retire when I get out in 69. George. December 23rd, 1967. Dear Robert, this is Saturday. There is so much noise on the tier that even my earplugs are useless. Grown men are acting like high school girls. The guards have some kind of sports on the radio. Everyone is happy. Emotion-filled cries of joy come from every cell. They're trying to forget their problems or pretend that they have none. It is easier that way, easier than grabbing the bull by the horns. Music and sports, their whole life, perhaps a little pimping or gambling. I got my official notice on the board meeting. They denied me another year. I go back next December. It will be 8 years then. Take care of yourself. George.